You're listening to the DFO Rundown Podcast with Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome to episode 15 of the DFO Rundown Podcast. I'm Jason Gregor. Once again, Frank Saravalli joins me as things are flying by. Frank, there's so much going on. We're just basically 2 weeks away from NHL trade deadline. Let's get to the big story. And unfortunately, it's an injury, but the loss for Aaron Ekblad and the Florida Panthers. Ekblad had been playing unreal. The Panthers were very good. They just lost their best defenseman. That's crushing.
Yeah, that's a grisly injury too. Just watching it makes me sick to my stomach. It's a tough one. Out extensive period of time, according to Joel Quenneville, and there's no way to replace him. And I get that the Panthers are going to probably look around here a little bit to see what they might be able to add, but I think they're in a really tough spot at the deadline because on the one hand, you're trying to prove to your top guns on your team, your Barkovs and your Huberdeaus, and also your market as well, that you're invested in winning, that you've got this great opportunity. But on the other hand, I think they're in a clear rung down from, and that was with Ekblad on the ice, from Carolina and Tampa in that division. So do you really go and load up at the deadline if you can, when you know that, at least in my book, it's unlikely that they beat one or both of those teams in a 7-game series. So I don't know what Bill Zito does, but I think they're in a tough spot.
So I want to ask you for like jockmkt.com, who in Florida stock is going to have to rise here on the blue line? For people who don't know, jockmkt.com, they combine fantasy sports like the stock market. You buy the value of the player. So if there was someone they were going to go on Florida right now on their blue line, like, do you see anybody who's capable of stepping up and becoming even a bigger part of that back end?
Yeah, Mackenzie Weegar has really stepped up this year for this team. He's gotten significantly better, and it's not just a look at his point production. He's closing in on a career high season, even in a shortened year. He just looks like a totally different player confidence-wise. And the other player I think we have to mention is Keith Yandle, right? What an odd, weird year it's been for Keith Yandle and the Panthers. I'm probably going to have to eat my shoe at some point based off of what I said in some earlier podcasts about this group being, not having it. They definitely have, when I watch the Panthers, and I was thinking about this and talking about it over the weekend with someone, the Panthers this year feel like the Vegas Golden Knights in their expansion year. Does that make any sense to you?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, they're kind of a group that no one expected, and they've come on and they've been way better.
And the whole year we were counting and saying, they're going to fall off now. They're going to fall off now. At some point they're coming back to earth, and they just haven't yet. And I think part of it is, and Vegas had this golden misfits thing going on. I think part of it is there was definitely some friction between the Panthers and management at the beginning of the year before training camp. And a lot of it revolved around Keith Yandle and his supposed healthy scratch that was coming that never did. And I wonder if that group sort of banded together as a team based off of how that very beginning of the season and training camp played out.
Oh, sometimes, it can unify the group when you don't necessarily like your boss, for sure. Now, let's stay in the Central, Frank, because the Nashville Predators are suddenly tied with Chicago. Dallas is still under 500, but they've got, I think, 4 games in hand, so they're still a little bit within striking distance. But then Columbus, they just lost back-to-back games to Detroit. Like, what's going on in the Central?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I still, I know that the Preds have played really well these last number of games. Look at their save percentage, though, 96% almost over these last 5 games. And I'm still not sold. I know you said that Nashville has the most favorable schedule. I still give it a couple weeks on Dallas. Trust me, just give it a couple weeks. And the Preds, though, now that they're in this position, major surgery required on the trade bait board. No, yeah. They're in the mix. And I had reported previously that in the discussions that they were having with Toronto about Mikael Granlund, that they were pulling back their assets. They weren't necessarily saying we're not trading. It's just that we feel like we're in the mix and we want to see how far we can go here. And now that they've come from even further back to where they are now, I think you'd have to take those Columbus players, David Savard, by the time Wednesday hits and we've got our new trade bait board, David Savard is going to be number 1. He has to be. You have to take him above Matthias Ekholm.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially after tough losses for the Blue Jackets.
To Detroit, I mean, what a lost weekend. 2 games to Detroit. Come on.
Brutal for them. And it just shows you, in this schedule, anybody can win at any time. And hey, quickly though, I want to get your thoughts on Ovi. Ovi is back to being Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah. He's been ridiculous. And that launches me into Frankly Speaking, by the way, as he closes in on the Rocket Richard race with Austin Matthews, 11 goals in his last 11 games. He's been insane. But Frankly Speaking for me, and I'll keep it really short, is next time Austin Matthews starts ridiculously hot, like he did this year, can we never talk about goal a game possibilities, or can he get to 56 goals in 56 games? I said it then. I'm saying it now. It was ridiculous to even think about. And I know that he's had the wrist injury. He finally got back on the board in overtime against the Oilers on Saturday. But still, that was insane to ever think about, let alone talk about on TV for a significant period of time, to devote any sort of attention to that. That it'll never happen.
So you're saying that Ovi's 11 goals in 11 games is not sustainable?
Well, so he's the one guy that has the ability for long stretches. He scored 48 or 49 in a 56 game stretch in his career. He's done it. He's at least has the track record. Yeah. Austin Matthews isn't close, and no one else has been close in the last almost decade. So to think that he was going to be at a goal a game pace this year, it's still impressive what he's done. I'm not taking anything away from him. 22 and 31 now, but come on, that was insane to think about.
Frank, the NHL also came out. They had to redo their schedule. The Montreal Canadiens, they're not playing tonight. They'll start tomorrow. So that means they're going to play 25 games in 43 days. The Boston Bruins had their schedules all, slid in there as well. Edmonton, Montreal make up their games, but it doesn't really hurt Edmonton. It's 2 extra games at the end of the season. Yep. They'll get a Montreal team that hasn't practiced very much and hasn't played in 10 days tomorrow night as the first of those makeups. What do you make of this for the Habs? Like 25 games in 43 days, like they're in a good position to make the playoffs. Are they going to have anything left come playoff time?
I'm fascinated to see it, because I was actually kind of thinking that what is it? They're going to end up with a week off or 8 or 9 days off, something like that. How beneficial could that be in the early going of this, jumping back into it? Of course, by the end of it, they're going to be dead tired, but at the beginning, they could be pretty refreshed, getting some time off that very few teams have had over these last number of weeks.
Yeah, maybe I saw Edmonton's first period after a week off, and they practiced, and their first period against Toronto, it's funny, it looked like a preseason game for them. They missed passes, then they got better in the second before they choked in the third period. But
look at the number of teams. Yeah, a number of teams' records coming back from a long COVID layoff. They've been horrendous since. The Flyers have been bad. The Sabres, you saw Eric Stahl talk about it. They never got themselves back together. The numbers don't dictate that they're likely to find success in the beginning, but I would have to imagine for some team at some point, the rest will be beneficial.
And Ken Hitchcock's going to join us right away. One of the winningest coaches in NHL history. He's living on the West Coast. So let's go to the West quickly. Arizona is now tied with the St. Louis Blues. Arizona has a much easier schedule. The Blues play Vegas and Colorado a lot down the stretch. What do you make of the Coyotes? They had a lot of guys who were on the trade bait board. What do you think they're going to do? And what do you think the Blues are going to do?
Well, I still think the Coyotes are open to doing anything. They're a true wild card out there in the West. And, I think it could be involving their goaltender in Darcy Kemper once he gets healthy. I think it could be with some of the guys in their back end. Hjalmarsson has been hurt, but he was a guy that I think people were interested in. I find it very hard to believe that Goligoski is not traded. Then there seemed to be some discussion about Connor Garland up front. I don't know why he would make any sense to move, even though he's due a big raise. You'd think a guy who's been producing almost at a point per game clip, and an RFA, a homegrown guy, is one that you'd want to keep. But they're a wild card. I still think the Blues are going to figure it out. They've had a ton of injuries, way more than most. And there is something off about that team. They've been off all year. Mike Hoffman, healthy scratch last game. He hasn't been a seamless fit, but I still think once they get all their pieces together that they'll find a way to dig in and compete. the Coyotes and Rick Tocchet has done an unbelievable job. Like, honestly, he should be in the mix for Coach of the Year. And by the way, speaking of pending UFAs, he's going to be a fascinating one to watch, because I think some teams would fire their coach and find a way to hire Rick Tocchet if he makes it to market this summer. But, you know, I still give the Blues a leg up on that spot. And if you're the Coyotes, again, you're not adding at the deadline. If anything, you're just going in neutral and you're hoping that you can compete. But does anyone really think the Coyotes are beating some of those teams ahead of them in a 7-game series?
Yeah, it's a tough spot. No question. You got to weigh the option of just making the playoffs to appease your fan base in a COVID year. It'll be fascinating to watch over the next 2 weeks leading.
I was going to say what fan base, but hey, like, all right.
Hey now. There's a few of them for sure. Let's get to our big guest today, Ken Hitchcock.
Our next guest needs little by way of introduction. This hockey lifer is 6th all-time on the NHL's games coach list, and better yet, 4th all-time on the wins list. His name is etched on the Stanley Cup with the 1999 Dallas Stars. Please welcome to the DFO Rundown, Ken Hitchcock. Hitch, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun listening and watching you guys.
So let's start with, what are you up to right now? Where are you, and what are you getting into?
I live in Palm Springs and Kelowna. I kind of split time. I've the last year and a half, I've worked a lot with the Bakersfield team, mostly with the coaching staff, and we're in constant contact. We're talking practice plans and overviews of the week that just got played. And I work with Jay and his staff a lot, and I really, really enjoy that part. I spent some time with Brad Lauer and his staff, and I did a lot of work with them before COVID hit. And then pretty much I'm in contact with Ken, I would say 5-6 times a week, and then we're in constant contact when the games are on. So I try to watch 3 games a day. I watch 2 live and then tape 1 and then watch it early in the morning when I get up. And so I've got a really good, I think, evaluation and handle on what the individual players are that might be up for trade or might be available, or looking forward to what they are. And then I'm able to watch our team play pretty much every game.
So 3 games a day, that's what I was going to ask you. You can't really turn it off, can you?
Not me. Like some guys can. I can't. Now, I've changed a lot. I don't listen to the volume. So anybody that's on play-by-play, I don't even know who they are. And I want to watch teams that are playing well, Frank, and I want to know why they're playing well and what elements in their game are there, so that I'm constantly learning. And the thing that really helps me stay current right now is that I'm able to participate in the practice plans with the American League team. So those plans are sent to me. Their game plans are sent to me. So I feel like I'm up to date with what's going on, systems changing and stuff going on. And then when I hone in on a team that I think is playing really well, or quite frankly, a team that's playing poorly, I want to know why, and I take notes on it, and then I enjoy that part of it.
Ken, as you watch all the games this year and everybody's playing only in their division, have you noticed from a coaching perspective, are tactics different? Because, you know, you expect there's only 6 or 7 teams, depending on what division you're in, that you're playing against. Have coaches been able to zone in more on specific things because you only really have to worry about a small group of opposing teams?
You know what, Jason? I think what's really evident right now is that the games come so quickly, the teams can't afford to game plan that much. They've got to just plan for their own energy level. So I think what you're seeing is the teams are trying to forge their own identity, not worry about the opposition. And in talking to the coaches around the NHL, they don't have time to game plan for different opponents and stuff like that. They know them already. They've played them multiple times already. So there's no planning except for your own plan, and get your own game up and running, get it in order so that you can put that out there as often and as quickly as you can. Because what happens right now winning and losing momentum is pretty evident right now. And if your game isn't on top, you can go on a swoon, and you can go from the top to the bottom real quick here, especially in those first 4 spots, because you don't have your game in order and you're playing 3-4 games a week. So it's tough. I've talked to a lot of guys, and they find that this year is the toughest year they've ever had as coaches, trying to keep the enthusiasm level up, trying to keep the energy up, trying to help the younger guys that aren't married with isolation issues and stuff like that. So, but I think the teams that have their game in order, they can force that game on the opposition no matter who they play.
So let's go back a little bit now, Ken, into your coaching career, because you're very unique in the fact you didn't play a super high level of hockey at all. And a lot of hockey coaches, either former NHLers or AHLers or junior stars potentially, you weren't that, but you became one of the best coaches ever. Take us through that path, Ken, for maybe people out that are like, damn, like I love hockey, but I'm not a good player enough to get a coaching job. So could there be another Ken Hitchcock in today's game? And if so, where do you get started for those who aren't necessarily high level players?
For me, Jason, when I decided to get into coaching, I made the decision that I wasn't the smartest guy in the room and I need to learn. And that's when I really latched on to the U of A Golden Bears. And I found that being able to hang around Claire Drake and Billy Moores, being able to observe practices, being able to come to games, being able to sit in the coach's room before and after games was really valuable for me. And I've been on this learning journey since, and I want to tap into anybody that I think that can make me a better coach. And it's not just hockey. It's I've got close friends in the NFL, close friends in Major League Baseball. I want to tap into anybody and really close friends in the military. I want to tap into anybody that can help me become a better coach. And from a technical and team building aspect, I couldn't have got a better mentor than Claire Drake. And Claire showed me what it was like before you even could think about winning, how you had to build your team and what elements had to be in place to build your team properly and keep them together. And when I was working for a living and coaching midget hockey in Sherwood Park, I was at least 4 times a week at the university, either watching practices or watching games. And I used to, for 10 or 11 years, I used to take lunch breaks and scoot and take them all around when the Bears were practicing, and I had their schedule, and I'd go and watch them practice. And Claire and Billy were good enough to give me their practice plans and stuff like that. So I felt like I was on this learning journey, and I didn't want to ever get off. And it's the same way, quite frankly, I feel now. It's why I love watching hockey even today, is because I feel like I can learn. And then I feel like now it's my turn to pass it on to other coaches.
So Ken, you've been getting that question for 30, 40 years now. Does it bother you that people, I don't know, I don't want to say think that way, but still ask? I mean, your credentials are bona fide, but it's almost like there's an asterisk next to that.
Yeah, because I came up really from the underground or from the ground floor, and I get that. But to me, I had a passion for coaching at a very young age, and I've never lost the passion. And it wasn't so much a passion for coaching as a passion for learning. And I think it's harder now. It'd be a lot harder now, but because I went through every level. I went from midget hockey to the NHL, and I passed every level. I didn't skip anything. And that's a grind. That takes a lot of years to be able to dedicate yourself to that. But I think my situation is very unique. I'm really proud of the fact that I survived in the National Hockey League and was able to stay so long. But I also feel like, Frank, I had got a really strong obligation. On a weekly basis, I probably talked to 12 to 15 coaches at various disciplines, and not many in the NHL, quite frankly. But I'm getting calls or texts, or we're going over stuff with coaches at the university levels, at major junior levels, at the NC2A levels. I'm in contact with these guys, and I've made myself available because I feel like I owe those guys the same opportunity that I was given by Billy and by Claire.
Good on you for that. I wanted to ask how much things have changed. You know, when you first started at the NHL level, for coaches, it was maybe 90 or 95% practice plans, X's and O's, game plans. And now it just seems like there's such a shift. You mentioned just previously, you know, the younger guys and dealing with isolation. How much has a coach's job changed to managing personalities and finding what motivates these players? And how different was it for you in your last stint?
I really enjoyed it in Edmonton. We weren't deep, and we knew that. And when we were in the playoff grouping, and we lost a couple of defensemen, we knew we were in trouble. But I really enjoyed it, and the reason I enjoyed it is I had spent some time learning on what that generation needed. And what's really changed, Frank, for me, and this is the simplest way I can put it, is when I started coaching, you told the players what to do, and you stayed on that. And they for the most cases, when I coached, they bought into that. And then you ended up doing the teacher part came out. You told them what to do and how to do it. And now the third part is what has to take place now. And that is they need to know where they're going, and you need to supply the end game before you even get going if you expect to have a buy-in. If you don't supply the end game, what's in it for them, what the benefits are, and explain to them exactly where this is going to take them, they won't buy in. And if you can't do that, you're going to have a really difficult time coaching this generation. And that's what I found out when I was in Edmonton. I learned a lot working with military people on how they explained it to their warfighters on their tasks and their missions, and explained the end game to them, good and bad. And they were a lot the same age as hockey players. And I really enjoyed putting that aspect into place in Edmonton. And I think that's necessary at every age now. When you're working in hockey, is you need to fully explain the end game before you can even expect the buy-in.
Jason, if I could ask one more, just a follow-up. Hitch, do you feel like when you were explaining that you had gotten through to these guys, or do you feel like, you know, if you could do it a little bit differently, you might?
I think when you explained it, you felt like you'd struck a chord that made sense to them. But you have to be an unbelievable listener in this generation of hockey players, because they have very strong opinions, and there's a lot of tags on them individually. You know, the players have individual coaches, individual trainers, individual nutritionists, psychologists, and there's a lot of voices in their ears. And when they start to talk to you, you have to be able to listen and let that play out, because if you shut that out, then they won't buy into what you want them to do. And you got to really be able to listen to them, because they're not a single entity like they were. You know, when everything was centered around the hockey club, it was the training staff they were trained them only. The strength coach was their only strength coach. That's not the same anymore. So they've got different opinions that have been forged by different conversations long before you get them. And you have to be, when you supply the end game to them, you better be prepared to listen to their questions and answer them properly, or you're not going to get any semblance of a buy-in.
Ken, you are one of the few guys with an NHL coaching resume who can relate to coaching young players, because you went up at every level, right? You didn't just coach pros. You know, you were helping out a girls team in the early 80s when, you know, there was barely any girls teams, for goodness sake. So for a lot of our amateur coaches, right, who are passionate about the game, what advice would you give to young coaches at, like, you know, U11, U9, U13, whatever it is? What's maybe one of the mistakes coaches make at that young level that they shouldn't be making?
Well, for me, every young level, every able level, really under 17 years of age, you need to be a teacher. And what I learned over time is if I couldn't teach the skill, I found people that would come in and be able to do that. I couldn't teach power skating. I didn't have the technique. So I brought people in every year. I was in Sherwood Park. We brought people in to teach power skating. So you have a lot of avenues open to you as a coach, but if you're limited in some areas, if you feel like you don't understand penalty killing or power play or the concepts of spatial relationships on the ice, you got to find people that can do that stuff and bring them in and get them to help you, because you can't limit yourself so you limit the player's growth. And to me, if you want your players to become better players and develop, you've got to supply them with the information they need. And if it's not there within your resources, then you got to go out and seek it and find it. And that's what I did. I found people, if I couldn't do it or I couldn't get it done, I found people that would come in and help me and get it done that way.
Now let's go to your career and let's kind of go back to your day with the Blazers. That's really where a lot of your success, you kind of start getting on the radar a little bit. I want to talk about the 1986-87 season. As a head coach, Rob Brown had the greatest year in WHL history at 212 points. It's ridiculous what he did that year as a coach. And then he got hurt, unfortunately, and missed, I think, 6 games in the playoffs for you guys, or 7 even for you guys that year. When you're coaching a guy who was clearly that much better than everyone offensively at that time, how did you challenge him to keep getting better?
Jason, Rob Brown taught me more about dealing with elite athletes than I've ever learned in my life. Because the way he played, when I started coaching, I came from a structured environment, because what I observed was a university environment and midget hockey. And Rob Brown really bothered me as a coach. And he drove me crazy. And he was an absolute beast in the big games. But when it was just a game on a Wednesday night, he used to drive me crazy. And so I would be complaining about some of his things. He was a gifted player. He was like Gretzky was in junior hockey. And I was sitting down with the captains and I said, Brownie this, Brownie that. And they stopped me and they said, what's your problem, Hitch? If he doesn't bother us, why should he bother you? And he sure as heck doesn't bother us. And it kind of was the wake-up call in learning to deal with those guys. And I've had guys like Modano and Zuboff and various players throughout my career in the NHL. And I really learned over time that if his play doesn't bother the players, then it shouldn't bother the coach. But the other thing that I learned over time is when you have skilled players who are top end skilled players, and in a lot of cases, they have weaknesses too. If you focus on their weaknesses, they stop using their strengths. And so I learned over time in real quick order, and it was working with guys like Rob Brown that taught me that focus and get them to do what they do well and really drill down on that. And then understand that the weaknesses are long-term. They might take 4 months, they might take a year to change. But if you focus on the weaknesses, then what they do well, they'll stop doing.
Do you think we've seen a little bit of that with McDavid and Draisaitl? Some of what you worked on with them maybe a couple years ago, that we're seeing the fruits of that a little bit more this year? With
Leon, yes. Connor's such a pure player. Like he's everything you want in a player is in one package. He was well on his way. For me, Leon, I've got a great relationship with both guys, and I'm really proud of the fact that Leon bought into the 200-foot game after we had some meetings and some talks about it. He just changed. He just took it upon himself. He didn't need a lot of coaching after we went through what I thought would make him a special player. He just changed right away. And you could see it during the season that he had when I was there, that he just he completely adapted to what it took to be a great 200-foot player. And for me, quite frankly, he's the best 200-foot player in the league right now. And, you know, the two of them together are dynamic. I love watching them when they play together. But Leon, for me, is the best 200-foot player in the National Hockey League because if you look at him in important zones, he gets his team to start with the puck every time. And then he's down low. He's a tireless guy. He doesn't get tired during the shift. There's no drop off during the shift. And I think he's a really, really unique guy.
How do you look at the Oilers and where they sit this season? It's almost like, you know, when I watch this group, it seems like sometimes a tale of two teams. Like even when you look at their record this year, they're 7-9-1 against teams heading to the playoffs and 13-5. They've crushed the teams below them. How do they get to that next level to compete a little bit better with the teams that are above them?
Well, for me, Frank, right now, they're playing as good as anybody team game wise. Their numbers around the puck, their puck support in what I call critical ice. Their puck support when the play is stopped, whether it's net front, corners, whatever, is as good as anybody in the National Hockey League. To me, there's about 5 teams that are playing at that level, puck support wise, at the top of the league, and the Oilers are one of them. Their team game has improved dramatically. One of the things that it takes to win in the National Hockey League at the end of the day are what I call the 1-4-9 ratio. A goalie, 4 defensemen, and 9 forwards. And that wins in the playoffs, that wins Stanley Cups. And that's where the Oilers, we have to grow. We've got to get to the point where our 3 lines can control the hockey game. Because if you look at this Northern Division right now, that's what Toronto has, and that's what Winnipeg has. And we've got to get that growth going to where we can not worry about sending out any of the top 3 lines. And that's why, for me, our team game is as good as it's been right now. It's really good. But individual growth of players, or whether a guy like Cassian can get back up to speed, who looks like he's really coming on now, whether Turris can get back into and get back up to speed, that's going to be a big determining factor to how we do in the playoffs, in my opinion, because you're going to need 9 forwards, and they all got to play against anybody. You look at Tampa when they made the change and brought Goodrow and Coleman in. That gave them the 3 lines that could play against anybody, and that's what wins in the end. And that's where we got to get our growth to right now.
Hitch, you coached Darnell Nurse in Edmonton for a bit. Now you watch it. I don't know if I can recall a defenseman who has taken his overall game to such an improvement in all his levels. He's really eliminated the major errors in his own zone. He gets the puck off his stick quicker than most forwards do on the rush now, and that's why he's got 11 goals. As a coach, what have you seen in the emergence of Nurse's overall game that's allowed Edmonton to have, at least for this season anyway, a legit number 1 defenseman?
Well, I told Kenny this. I feel like Darnell is Petro. And Pietrangelo and Darnell have the same qualities. Do they make a few mistakes? Yes. But the good stuff they do far outweighs anything they do mistake-wise. And they're 2 players that never get tired on the ice. Darnell never gets tired. He never has a drop-off in energy. He can play 30 minutes a night and still be the fastest player on the back end at the end of the night. And I think as maturity's coming into his game, the mistakes are becoming fewer and fewer every game. And the other thing is that he's able to pace himself and know when to jump and know when to hang back. So his vision has really increased in understanding where he should be on the ice, which comes with maturity. But the engine that he has, the competitive engine, is incredible. And it's a lot like Petro in that he just doesn't get tired. He makes strong plays when he's under pressure. And I think what you're seeing is the emergence of a true number 1 defenseman.
Hitch, I want to go back a little bit. We've had a lot of your former players, write articles, talk about, you were a great coach, but you were also at time a guy who would really get on certain players. You know, Brennan Morrow wrote a pretty funny story about you. Can you talk about your relationship specifically with those Dallas Stars teams? And you know what, when you have the respect of your players, that's all that matters. Coaches and players don't have to be best buddy, but you had an ability to just be on guys on the bench. And then the next day you'd be like, hey, how's it going? So how did you create that personality? And was there any players as buttons you like to push?
I don't know so much as buttons I'd like to push, Jason. You know, that's the one regret probably I have as a coach, is that when I coach a team, I believe the team can do superhuman things. I believe my players are special, and I've always believed that. But I think sometimes as a coach, you don't tell them that. And I drove players hard that I really believed in. And I probably didn't say that enough to them, but I pushed players that I thought had a special ability to really impact the hockey game and impact our team. And I pushed people into areas that I thought at times would be uncomfortable for them because I really believed in them. And I think the one thing that I look back as a coach that I wish I would have done more of, because it's exactly what you have to do now, and that is if you want to push a player and you want to get him into the uncomfortable part of the game that is the winning part, then he's got to know that you believe in him, and he doesn't just think that you're being critical of him. And I think that's a really important quality to have in a coach right now. But I push players because I believed in them, and I believed that they had had the ability to have a special impact in the game right now. And the thing that's hard about coaching is the players can't get to where I need to get to as a coach without my help. And getting them through that wall is really difficult because there's going to be conflict when you're doing it. And I think looking back, the one thing that I would really have liked to sit down with some of the players and say, I did this because I've done it since then. We've had lots of good talks, a lot of guys, but I really believed in them. And so I pushed them to what I thought would be areas that were uncomfortable, but if they got through them, then they could be special players.
When you push those guys like that, and a lot of times it's your best players, and you've talked about this before. You just said 1-4-9, and you said, hey, if your best players aren't on the same page as you as a coach, your chances of winning are pretty low. So you look back and you had lots of different personalities in Dallas and Philly and Columbus and then in Edmonton and Dallas again. How important was it, like right away, to create at least so you knew your best or most important players on each team were on the same page as you? Like, did you sit down with a group of 4 or 5, or was it individual? How did you get to ensure that your leaders and you were on the same page?
I really tried to create debate. I really wanted to push debate. I wanted them, in order for them to have impact, I wanted to have hard conversations with them so that at times they became emotional and that the buy-in became stronger. I wanted a very strong buy-in. And I always felt as a coach, I coached 4 or 5 and I instructed 25. And I really worked hard with the captains. I put a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. I explained a lot of things to them, but I also demanded a lot from them. I really feel like unless your leaders are bought in, you have no chance with your hockey club to progress. And to me, I was very communicative with the leaders, but I was also very demanding of them. And to me, I felt like those guys were the special people on the team that if we were going to grow and become a championship team, their buy-in had to be 100%. And I really pushed for the 100% buy-in from those guys. And I tried to explain it to them as much as I could why it was so important. But I also didn't let them off the hook. If they didn't play well, I didn't let them off the hook.
All of that said, Hitch, were there times and moments you think you felt like you crossed the line?
I think you feel like, I don't know that you use the word cross the line. I think that, the
line has changed, by the way. I mean, just over time.
Oh, I agree. I think one of the things is you're always on one side of the line or the other. I think my strength was I never took it personally, Frank. I always felt like the next day was the next day. So if I was mad at a player or a player was mad at me, I never let it carry me. I never let it carry very far. And I would move on very, very quickly. And like I said, I know that the hockey's an emotional sport and the bench is an emotional area, but I never carried anything. I never took it personally. I never went after the players on a personal basis. I wanted it on a performance basis. But for me, if I felt a guy was capable of a lot and could really impact our team in a positive way, I remember some of the hard conversations I had with Manny Malhotra. And I felt like Manny had a grip on our team in Columbus, and we were stalled out. We were going nowhere. And if we were going to go anywhere, Manny had to stop being an apologist and start being a leader. And we really went at it one day on the bench. And we really went at it the next day. Manny changed, and our team made the playoffs for the first time ever. And it was him driving the bus, and he drove it. And I left him alone after that, but he drove the bus hard. And he pushed guys into areas that a week before that, he was an apologist for them. And he went from being their friend to being their teammate. And there's a big difference between being friends and being teammates.
Interesting. Now, this is the last one from me. Just in catching up with you, you can tell that the passion still burns for you. Do you want to coach again?
No, I don't. I look at what these guys go through, and I know I love talking to coaches. I love working with coaches. That's my passion. I love trying to help guys, but I couldn't live it every day. I look at what these guys go through. I talk to these guys, especially the few guys I talk to in the NHL, and it's a hard life for these guys right now. And I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could be married 12 hours a day. I want to be able to turn off the TV. I want to be able to turn off the computer. I want to be able to do something else. And I guess the best way to describe it, because Mike and I talk about it, is for the first time in our lives, we get to enjoy a second cup of coffee. And it's never been like that for a long, long time. And you feel like that it just becomes that's a normal part of your life, Frank. And it's, you find out how stressful it is once you get away from it. And I feel like I'm in the right spot right now. I love doing what I'm doing, but I don't think I could do it. I'm never going to lose my passion for coaching. I'm never going to lose my passion for instructing, for getting better, on the coaching side of things, but I just don't think I could do the grind every day.
Well, Ken, you've always seemed to have a pretty good grasp of where you were, what your strengths and weaknesses were as a coach and definitely as players. And I got one more, and then we'll get to rapid fire. When you go back through, all those years, and, Manny Malhotra, it's a really good example, because I think sometimes people would assume the guy who challenges his teammates has to necessarily be the best player on the team. And that's not always the case. You have to find out like who's the pulse in the room. When you go back to specifically Dallas, because you had your most success there, you won a cup, you lost in the Stanley Cup final. Was there ever a player on that team that maybe publicly didn't get the respect and acknowledgement of how important they were to that group?
Well, for me, it was Brett Hull. I feel like Hully was a cast of characters himself, but man, this guy was tough. And this guy would play through pain. And this guy would come off the table and play. And he never got the accolades for how tough he was and how smart he was as a player, and how, he had the combative streak with everybody and he had an opinion on everything. But he had tremendous personal character that I saw when he was there, when we were going from conference finals to cup finals and stuff like that. I watched him limp into the locker room in the morning, never leave the table, limp off the table, put his gear on and be one of the best players on the ice. And he gets credit as a goal scorer, but he was much, much more than that. And he was a very, very important piece of the puzzle in Dallas there.
All right, okay, Ken, we'll get to rapid fire. Just some quick questions. You got to answer them. So here we go. What is Ken Hitchcock's relaxing cocktail of choice?
It's dark roast coffee.
Dark roast
It's the
coffee.
most calming thing I can drink right now.
All right, okay. So Ken, I've got $500. I just put it on the ground. You get to pick the club and the distance from the fairway that you are most confident you can hit the green and be close to the pin. What's the distance and what's the club?
I have a Rocket 3-wood, which is 13 degrees loft. I swear I hit it so much I'm going to wear out the damn face of that club. So I can hit it. I can hit it $165 and I can hit it 200. But if I don't have that club, because it doesn't get more than 8 feet above the ground, if I don't have that club, I can't even play the game anymore.
Okay. Of all the coaches you coached against, which one did you feel made the best in-game adjustments?
I would say the guy that was the toughest to coach against, you couldn't beat on the bench, was Scotty. Scotty, I came in when things were rolling in Detroit, and you might fool him for one shift, but as soon as you had a dominant shift, the next time you played against that line, he had checking people on the ice and trying to shut them down. He never missed it. He never missed anything on the bench. He was a man that was way ahead of his time on bench management.
Speaking of bench management, how's that a skill that you learn as a coach? You have to be behind the bench to get it. Was there any tips on bench management and understanding the flow of a game?
I think the best coaches in the world are the ones that pull back from the emotion of the game. The ones that can stand there and actually feel like there's a plastic shield between them and the players. Those are the best coaches. So they remove themselves from the game emotionally, and they're able to make decisions because they can see all 10 players on the ice. I think a lot of times as a coach, you only see your own players. The best coaches in the world are the ones that take that one step back and can view everybody, both opponent and their own players, and do it and make decisions that are unemotional. And those, to me, are the best coaches in the world.
You can only pick one. You're on a power play. You get Zubov or Modano. Who are you taking?
Zubov. 100%.
Why?
Because he's a special player. Like, he's the calmest player and the most critical ice I've ever coached in my life. Mo was a great player and a great talent. But Zubov saw the ice and saw other people, made people around him better. And the calmness that he had, whenever you had a power play in the opposition and Zubov was running it, it made the other team really, really nervous. Very similar to what Connor and Leon do right now. Zubov did it, but did it from the top end.
Player you coached who you think would be a great head coach?
I think, quite frankly, it was Rob Brown. I thought Brownie had the ability to, if he wanted to go down that path, could have been a great head coach. I think he saw the game from a skill side of things. I thought his ability to read the game and his ability to understand what's taking place was incredible. I thought his feel for the game was top shelf. And I really thought, quite frankly, when he left, that he would dip into coaching.
Player you coached who you had the most fun chirps back and forth with?
Revo. I loved Revo, but man, if I gave it to him, I got it right back. And I got it back where the bench, we had to almost stop play. The bench was laughing so hard. He gave it to me as good as anybody. And he's a really funny guy. And he's got the quickest wit I've seen for a long, long time.
And lastly, Ken, so you mentioned Bowman was the best in-game tactician. Was there a coach you just loved to coach against that you really wanted to beat?
There was a couple of guys. For me, Darrell and I went at it. It was like the blue collar coaching gig, and Darrell and I really went at it. I love coaching against Darrell because your team, you gauged your competitiveness at the end of the night every time we played, especially when he was in Los Angeles, because we had some classic playoff series. And the other one for me was, and he's a great friend, but I love coaching against him, was Barry Trotz. Trotzy and I would chirp each other and be all over each other. But he had his team ready to play every night. And, but for me, Darryl gauged whether your team had a work ethic and could make sacrifices, because if you didn't, he steamrolled you. And so it was a real good gauge on whether I could prepare the players for the sacrifice ready that you needed to play that team.
Hitch, it's always great to catch up with you. Your passion for the game is really unmatched by very few. I love to hear that you're still in the game. You're enjoying golf, and hopefully we'll have you back on the pod sometime in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Ken Hitchcock, man, that guy's a legend. And honestly, Frank, when you talked in their intro, fourth in all time in wins, 6th all time in games coach, he really should be in the Hall of Fame.
There's no question, and he will be at some point. I just hope it's sometime soon.
Yeah. And
by the way, that Ryan Reeves answer, I love that. Quickest chirp or best chirp, like the fact that he said they almost had to stop the game. The entire bench was laughing so hard. I don't think we get a full sense of just how quick Hitch can be himself. In the media. Like, we don't really see that side of him. We see these, detailed answers, but he's definitely, like, Hitch definitely has a sharp tongue.
He is very, I've had so many of his former players over the years, they're, oh God, Hitch could grind you, but like, man, like he could give it, but he could also take it. Like
that's such a big part of it
on guys who, if he gave it to them and they gave it back, he was just like, all right, I'm loving this. And like Brett Hall and him used to go at it. I remember Joe Newendike, who's a pretty quiet guy, telling me, like, there's times on the bench, he's just, I can't believe how they talk to each other. And like Brendan Morrow, I'm sure you read it, and he's talked about it, how for him, the moment he got Hitch's respect was when he finally stood up for himself and gave it back to his coach.
Well, because coaches want to know how invested you are, how interested you are in giving it back. If I played for Hitch, just listening to him, I'd be nervous if he wasn't coming at me, because that's how you're not a significant part or not a key cog in the wheel, because he just wasn't spending any time thinking about you or coming after you. And so, I really liked and keyed in on the part where he said about not getting personal. It's one thing to be critical. It's one thing to be on guys and try and push them to be successful, but it's a different thing to be personal. And I think, that's where, I think coaches really get themselves into trouble sometimes.
For sure. Well, that's another fantastic pod with Hitch. We thank him for coming on. And Frank, we'll talk to you on Friday, and we will see, man. You might have to readjust the trade bait board. The Nashville Predators are moving on up. So are the Coyotes.
We're going to need to do some serious surgery on that trade bait board.
All right. We'll talk to you Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Saravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.